Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink, I have in sample form, and it's by Graf von Faber-Castell, and it's Stone Gray. Now, personally, I love intentional gray inks. I really do. I do not love black inks that are actually gray. Yeah, so, I'm actually quite critical of that. I want my black inks to be black, and I like them not to have shading. It's pretty much my only ink where I don't want shading. However, I love intentional gray inks, and I love when they shade, and I really enjoyed this ink. I really did. Spoiler alert. But I was really excited to test it. In fact, I only finished testing this, I think, 3 days ago, so this is a very fresh test. But I've been excited to test it ever since I did this swab, or smear, because I use a paint knife. Now, I want you to look at this. Do you see how there's like hints of gold? Almost like a green gold through here? This gray has some seriously cool undertones. I've been really looking forward to testing it since I did that, I think, God, what was it, December? Maybe? I don't know. But yeah, so, anyways, two pens I used for these tests were these. This is a Lamy Safari in extra fine, but, you know, it's a Lamy extra fine. They're known for not being the finest fines. But then I also used this Lamy Safari with a 1.1 stub, and it was flying out of this nib. This one, pretty normal. This one, holy wow. So, we'll get to that. Now, let's start off with some comparisons. Here's Stone Gray, and here's Diamine's Graphite, which actually has some little hints of green in it as well, but, and is a gray, but, I mean, I really enjoy this ink. Previously, when I wanted a dark gray, this used to be my go-to. I'm seriously thinking about buying a bottle of this. The thing is, I don't even have money for samples, so that's going to have to wait. Now, in one of my tests, I say that this reminds me of a Mont Blanc Oyster Gray with a little more oomph behind it. Now, before I got really into inks, people used to constantly just give me cartridges, like packs of cartridges, and so Oyster Gray was the gray I was most familiar with, and that one does have some interesting undertones. You can see here it almost has like a silvery gold thing. It's slightly purple. But it is fairly light. So, you know, when I say that this has a little more oomph behind it, I mean that as a good thing. Now, when I was talking about blacks that are actually gray inks, this is the most, in my memory, prominent offender that I can think of. This, I mean, look. But it does do a cool thing when you put water on it. This is Diatramentus Charles Dickens, which I believe is just another name for Diatramentus Cement Gray, which does have a green in it. In fact, a good bit of green in it. And then I also included Noodler's Lexington Gray, which, since buying it, I use more often than I do graphite, because this has some amazing waterproofness. However, it is lighter, but it does shade very nicely, so yeah. There are my comparisons. Now, let's check out the chromatography, because this chromatography was rather surprising. Now, as you might be able to tell, and this is the standard chromatography, where, you know how you're supposed to do it, where you put the line of ink and instantly drop it in the water. You can see that sort of goldish thing going on, right? Like, it's gray, but it's almost like there are little hints of gold in it, like a dark gold. You can see that initial band very clearly, and then you can see the gold creeping up, and then you get this, it's almost like a slate purple. It's not quite lavender, but anyways, here's where I let it dry, which is not how you're supposed to do it. But look at how much darker that got. And there's less ink moving up, and there's actually a lot less of that purple-y slate thing. And I was so surprised when I saw the water keep moving and the ink stop right after I dipped it. So I watched and drew a line exactly where the water stopped. So the water moved much further than the ink after it dried. which from previous experience tells me that there is probably some waterproofness. So, what does it stand up against? Water. Yeah, it's pretty waterproof. A lot of the purplish stuff will wash away and you get this sort of gray gold stuff, but it really resists water. And that gray gold stuff turns really kind of a, like, baby food mushed carrots color when you add bleach. That was weird. Ammonia pen flush kind of got it moving, but honestly it washed out of my pens with water just fine. Hydrogen peroxide, I don't even really know how to describe that. So moving on. Alright, paper test. Top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. It's nice. It's a nice gray. I'm digging it. So, it's, okay, so if you're familiar with pencils, at least this is my memory from art school, hard lead pencils tend to be lighter, and soft lead pencils tend to be darker. And this ink really reminds me of a soft lead pencil, because it's a dark gray, and it kind of has a bit of a texture to it, but it's nice. So the extra fine took 11 seconds to dry, but as I said, it was really flying out of that stub, so, and look at that smear. It took 25 seconds. I really wanted to show you this scrubby. Do you see where it's laid on really thick? You sort of get that, like, hints of gold in there, and in the smear, you can see the, like, hints of gold in the initial strokes. Lovely shading, really nice. Very well behaved, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. All good in that regard. And check out this water test. So it's almost like if you remove that purpley stuff, you get this, but it is very clear and very there. I mean, even the extra fine is super clear. I mean, gee, yeah, wow, okay. Next up is Fabriano. It's 85 grams per square meter. It's totally chlorine free. It's got the stamp of approval from the Forestry Service something or other. It's great. It's not as steamroller smooth as Clairefontaine. It's not ceramic coated like Rhodia, but man, I love this paper. It tends to be able to handle inks that other papers kind of struggle with. But oddly, despite it being sopping wet in that stub, it actually dried a bit faster than it did on several of the other papers, which was fascinating. So the extra fine took 13 seconds, which is longer, but yeah, this stub took 24. Now, again, I kind of want to show you this. You can see the gold, the hints of gold underneath in the, right? I mean, you can see that, right? And again, where it's laid on pretty thick, you get sort of like that hint of gold. And I don't mean gold like shiny gold, but I mean like the color. It's almost like a ruddy gold. I don't know. Anyways, yeah, great. I mean, this shading is just really nice, and it's a dark gray, but it's an intentional gray. You don't look at this and think, oh, they were really trying to make a black ink. No, this is a very intentional gray. Really liked it. And again, let's look at this water test. Dyed the page maybe a little bit, but look at how clear that is, even in the extra fine. So clear. If you had to recover that, you absolutely could. And actually the camera's turning it more goldish. Here it's a little more green. But it looks like a soft lead pencil, which I really enjoy because I'm morally opposed to pencils. But I think if you write something... Anyways, I'll get into that another time. But yeah, so I love the color. Even though it's gray and people will say gray is not color. This has color. It has green. It has some gold in it. But again, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. All good in that regard. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where again we get some great shading. And even though we can see the lines, it doesn't actually look thin. I mean, it does in the smear, but I mean, come on, that's a smear. And look at that smear. I'm telling you, it was flying out of that 1.1 stub. So no wonder it took 27 seconds to dry. Now, the extra fine took 14, which kind of makes sense. And again, you can see sort of those hints of gold in the little ticks there, and you see right there where it was laid on really thick, you can kind of see it there, right? I'm not crazy. And then the shading is really nice. It's easiest to see in the stub just because, you know, it's bigger and I don't have a macro lens. But yeah, really great. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. All good in that regard. And again, the water test kind of surprised me. I mean, especially in that stub. I mean, okay, the more ink you put down, the more there will be to remain. But still, you can read that extra fine. If you had to recover that, you absolutely could. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times. And since it's so thin, it can echo. So, you know, always something to be aware of. Now here is where it really, to me, reminded me, I think it's because of the way that paper works and makes ink sort of pool in different ways, really reminded me of Mont Blanc's Oyster Gray, but with more oomph behind it. Had more ink in that ink. However, Mont Blanc Oyster Gray will dye plastics pink. Very soft pink. Someday I'll remember to bring out a cartridge and show you guys, because all those cartridges turn pink. So that always kind of unnerves me. Anytime I have to put that in anything, I'm hesitant. But this did not do that. So well behaved. You get this fantastic breadth of shading. I mean, look at that. And again, you can see like the tiniest little hints of that like almost gold in the center. I don't think it looks thin on here, just because it manages to be so dark even in the thinnest parts. Now, I was actually really glad that on here that 1.1 didn't pass 30 seconds, because I usually stop counting at 30. However, that extra fine did take 16. God, just great shading. And it was really pouring out of that 1.1, so we actually don't get a ton of shading in that 1.1, just because there was so much ink coming out of it. But yeah, I mean, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no sheen. I said maybe there's some echo just because this paper's so darn thin. And if there is, I'd say it's mostly in the scrubby. But I think that's from me laying it on really thick to see if I could get any sheen. Which we don't, but honestly, I was really happy with it as is. Now, this paper loves to let ink slide away when you add more water. It kind of did, but honestly, not nearly as much as we usually see. Again, look at that 1.1. That's very clear, very there. Even the extra fine is still readable. Those dots are super dark, but I mean, even here in the scrubby, you can make out where that water drop was. But that's very clear, very there. Now, for the next 3 tests, I just used the extra fine except to write the name. And this is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. And if you saw my review yesterday of Dye Mine Hope Pink, and you're new to these reviews, check this out. This is what I mean. Now, there is spread. And there is lots of spread. Because that's what this paper generally does. I mean, look at that. It almost looks like the... Ugh. You lose shading. It absorbs almost instantly into the paper. And then you get wooliness and you get feathers. It's not great, but it's still like a hearty gray. It never looks like a weak black. It's just, yeah. Now, we don't get bleed except in the 1.1, but considering how it was flying out of that nib, I think that's asking a lot. See how everything here is very hazy? You know, and it doesn't get dark. So nothing came to the other side. If you weren't picky, maybe even you could write on the other side of this. I am picky, so I wouldn't, but now look at this. Check out this water test. It didn't feather twice, or spread twice, or explode. It didn't dye the page. It didn't blink. That is a perfect water test. Look, it's the exact same darkness as the... That's impressive. The paper sucks. The ink was impressive. Now, next up is Mead Notebook Paper. And I'm back to the kind of Mead, not that you get in like the 5-star spiral binders, but like the kind you get in the composition books, which has the texture and feel of almost like newsprint, or more like a very cheap paperback. So it is a bit more spongy, and it's actually more large pulp. Never mind, it's a paper thing. Anyways, yeah, so we are going to get more wooliness than we did on the old Mead. However, we don't get nearly as much wooliness as we did on here. 3 seconds to dry. And we do get some feathers, but not nearly as much. You see, I mean, it's mostly like an intense wooliness. Here we got like legit feathers. It was ugly. We didn't get nearly as much spread either. Look at the line width. Very good. And we didn't get any bleed. We got, I mean, like here, even the 1.1, I mean, it got darker than the rest, but we got no bleed. None. And this is like the worst Mead paper they make. Again, water test, quite impressive. Not as dark as a 20 pound, but stayed really dark. Didn't feather, didn't explode, and this paper tends to freak out when you add water. Very recoverable. And look, even after the water test, like the dots got really dark, but the rest didn't come through. Not bad. Now lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, which I hate, because it hates ink, and they make you pay so goddamn much for it. Ugh. I hate this paper. God damn it. But, yeah. Yeah, we get this, which we didn't even have here. We get this. And look, this is the 1.1, but everything else is the extra fine, which was not super wet. It was mildly wet. And, like, if I bring it in close, you realize that it's pretty much like every letter nearly comes through. And we get this, like, kind of gross texture. And it took 9 seconds to dry. What the hell is that about? And, like, yeah, we get shading, but in the areas where we get shading, that's also where we see the trouble. So, like, you see the bottom of that second E is darker, but that's also where we start to get feathers. So is the shading worth it? I don't know. Is it to you? Maybe you think so, because you paid so much for this crappy paper. I'm not kidding. I have about 20 notebooks of this stuff that I don't know what the heck I'm going to do with. Ugh. A lot of tests, apparently. I hate this paper. And look at this water test! If my camera will stop freaking out. Look, it like decided to double down on feathering. And like half of it washed away. Like, look, that's kind of gone, and that's kind of gone, but that's there, and that's there, and that's there, and that... I hate this paper. Anyways, so, there you go. For your consideration from the Triple N Network. Shuffle, shuffle. Graf von Faber-Castell's Stone Grey. Great stuff. Honestly, if you like Mont Blanc's Oyster Grey, I highly suggest you try this out. It actually did very well on cheap papers. And no, I do not count Moleskine as a cheap paper because you have to pay so much for it. This is it's a little hardier, it's a little darker, still shades a ton. Has some waterproofness that Oyster really doesn't have. Fascinating undertones. I mean, it's almost got like a lavender-ish slate thing to it, but then it's also got this like green gold thing. Yeah, for some reason it was running real wet in that 1.1 stub, but honestly, it just made it look beautiful. It looks like a soft lead pencil, like a dark pencil. It's great. Anyway, so for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.